I'm sorry, I was talking, but I guess no sound was coming. Again, my name is Manad Daphnis. I'm the Director of Financial Aid for the Miami-Dade College Wolfson campus, and I am delighted to have the opportunity to share with you some information I think will be helpful to you as you attempt to secure the funding to pay for your education. Please, at any point during the conversation, if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask. This afternoon we'll concentrate on what financial aid is, where it comes from, and what you have to do to apply for financial aid. Now, what is financial aid? Financial aid is really any resource that's made available to assist a student and to pay for their tuition, or to pay for their education, I should say. What is financial aid, basically? Many times a lot of individuals confuse financial aid with the most basic form of financial aid, which is the Pell Grant, because when they complete the FAFSA, which is the form application for financial aid, the federal government responds directly to their eligibility for the Pell Grant or not, whether they're eligible for the Pell Grant or not. And many people, if they're not eligible for the Pell Grant, confuse that with them not being eligible for financial aid. But we can see that financial aid is more than just the Pell Grant. It can be grants, which the Pell Grant is a type. It can be scholarships, it can be loans, and it can be employment opportunities. Grants and scholarships are funds that in the overwhelming majority of the cases you do not need to pay back. They're given to you. Grants are usually based on need. That's why when you fill out the FAFSA, you will find that they'll ask you a lot of personal financial information for yourself and your parent. That's to establish what we call a need that will let them know whether you're eligible for particular grants or not. Then we have scholarships. Scholarships, unlike grants, most of them are not need-based. They're usually based on merit or talent, something that you're exceptional at, whether it be you excel academically or you are good at doing something. You have a particular talent. But both grants and scholarships are funds that you don't need to pay back. They're given to you. They're free. Loans, on the other hand, it's funding that you do have to pay back. It's money borrowed with interest. And of course, we have what we call employment opportunities, which is work study, or the work study programs, which there are a variety of different work study programs. And we can classify those four different categories or types of financial aid into two categories. First, we have the gift aid, which are the grants and the loans, which again are funds that you don't need to pay back. And you have the self-help types of aid, which are the loans and the work programs, which basically require that you pay them back. You either pay them back or have to work for them. We talked about, there are many slides that we'll just move through because we basically talked about them already. Now, we'll go ahead and go into basically how to apply for financial aid. Do you just say you want to go to school and then automatically you get funding, or is there something, or are there some things that you have to do to make sure you get financial aid? The most important thing that you have to do to secure funding in financial aid is to complete what we call the FAFSA. It's the free application for federal student aid. Before we get into the application process, there are a couple of terminologies or terms you have to be familiar with. One is what we call an academic year. The academic year in most traditional colleges and universities has 3 semesters. And it begins usually in the fall, and the fall is from August, late August, all the way to December. And you have it's followed by the spring semester, which begins in January, and that's from January to April. And then you have the summer, which is the end of the academic year. So in most colleges and universities you are going to be attending, they'll have those 3 semesters, and that's what's going to make up an academic year. There's a question, is this a private institution? No, it's not a private institution. Miami-Dade is a public institution. Uh, yeah, so every academic year you plan to attend school, you have to complete a FAFSA. The FAFSA is made available to everyone as of January 1st of every year. And the timeline to follow to make sure you are giving yourself the greatest opportunity to receive consideration for all the different types of financial aid you could be eligible for. From January to February, make sure the FAFSA gets done. Even though the academic year does not really begin until late August, the time to begin the process is again, or to complete the FAFSA is in January and February. Now, after you do the FAFSA, that's not the end of the process. It's just the beginning. I usually refer to financial aid as a multi-process to where you have different levels of processing. It is first done at the federal level where you complete the FAFSA and send your information to the Department of Education. And now, as you are completing the FAFSA, you are going to be asked what institution or what institutions do you plan to attend. Now, once the federal government receives the information on your FAFSA and they process it, they will then send your information to those institutions, and those institutions are in turn responsible for doing another level of processing themselves, to where they may ask students to submit certain documents and they confirm the student's eligibility. Again, we'll go back to what is an academic year and why is that important. And it's important because every year that you plan to attend school, you are going to have to complete a FAFSA that corresponds to the academic year. Currently, we are in the 2013-14 academic year, which will end in the summer of 2014, and we will be beginning the 2014-15 academic year starting in the fall of 2014, and it's going to go all the way through to the summer of 2015. And for that school year, you have to complete a 2014-15 FAFSA. And if you have not yet done the FAFSA, I would strongly recommend that you get it done as soon as possible, because again, the timeline you are looking at for each academic year you plan to be in school is January and February. You complete the FAFSA. If the school now requires certain documentation, you need to make sure the school has documents required of you no later than May. Okay, now how do you apply? What do you have to do to complete that FAFSA? There are two ways you can complete the FAFSA. One, you can do a paper application, and two, you can do it electronically. If you do a paper application, which I would not recommend to anyone, it would take about a month and a half to 2 months before the federal government sends a response back to you and to your school. But if you do it electronically, it only takes about 3 to 4 days for that information to be sent to your institution and for that institution to communicate with you. Now, if you will be doing it electronically, there are other benefits in addition to saving time. And we'll go back to those slides in just a little bit. And it's what I want to outline is really the timeline it takes when you do a paper application versus an electronic application. It says here it takes about 1 to 2 weeks, but it really doesn't take that long. It takes about really 3 to 4 days, and the paper application does really take about 4 to 6 weeks before you get a response back. And once they get the information from your FAFSA, the federal government will communicate back to you. If you do it electronically, they will send an email to you with the response to let you know what needs to happen, whether they processed it, or if they need anything from you. If you do the paper application, they will send a paper student aid report to you, and again, that's going to take a long time. In addition to saving on the time, when you do it electronically, there are also certain built-in mechanisms that can alert you to potential mistakes that you're about to make. Whereas if you do a paper application, unless you're in the office, in the financial aid office, to where someone can look at your application for you, There are no built-in mechanisms that will alert you to potential mistakes. It's just you fill it out, you mail it in, and if you made mistakes, you have to wait until they send it back to you so you can make the corrections. And another cool feature in doing it electronically is you can load your information directly from the IRS to your FAFSA. As you complete the FAFSA, they'll ask you, remember I said, some personal information about you and your parents. Some of that personal information will be about the income that you and your parents made, related to your tax information if you filed for taxes. Now, when you do it electronically, you can, instead of you filling out line by line the tax information, connect your FAFSA to the IRS, and that part of the FAFSA will be completed electronically, and it's going to be just you providing some information that links your information directly from the IRS to your FAFSA. And the reason that's important is, one, the potential for you making mistakes on that part of the application doesn't exist anymore, because they know it's coming directly from the IRS. And number two, should you be selected for the process we call verification, which is where the federal government will be asking you to provide documents to your school to verify the accuracy of the information you are reporting on the FAFSA, even if you are selected for that process, this is one less piece of document you will have to deal with. Okay. Now remember when we talked about what you have to do. Now let's talk about what are some of the things that they will be asking you as you are completing the FAFSA. What are some of the things that are important the federal government will take into consideration when processing your FAFSA? We do have a question, and it says, what if I don't qualify for the FAFSA application? Does the institution give out merit scholarship? In most instances, even if you do not qualify for a Pell Grant, because everybody is qualified to fill out the FAFSA, you may not be eligible for the Pell Grant. And for most scholarships that you are going to be applying for, whether it be from the institution or from an outside source, you are still going to be required to complete the FAFSA. So make it a point every year to complete the FAFSA, whether you think you will be eligible for the Pell Grant or you are not going to be eligible for it. And yes, most institutions do have scholarships that they help, especially if you're a good student. But the key thing is to make sure you do the FAFSA and find out when the application process begins, and make sure you meet the deadlines if you are submitting any institutional applications for a scholarship. Now, what are some of the things that the federal government will be looking at when you do your FAFSA, or they do require that you have? You do need to have a valid social security number. You need to be a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen, and that part of it that says eligible non-citizen, it's not really up to you to determine you are an eligible non-citizen or not. If you don't know what your status is, or you are not sure about whether or not your status is an eligible non-citizen, please still complete the FAFSA and allow the feds to do so, and let you and us know that this is a citizenship status that is eligible for federal financial aid, or that's not eligible. Either way, don't take it upon yourself to make that decision. You do need to have a standard high school diploma or GED. No, there are no exams that will substitute for you having the high school diploma or a GED, or an equivalent to the high school diploma. It could be a foreign high school diploma as well, as long as you have a high school diploma or something equivalent to the high school diploma. To fill out the FAFSA also, you will need to have your prior year income tax information. That's only if you are required to file for taxes. Now, the point that many people have the misconception that they have to do a tax return to fill out the FAFSA. That's a myth. There are certain instances where you are required to do a tax return. If you are required, then yes, you will have to. But if you are not required, it is not necessary for you to do a tax return. And if you will, since my recommended timeline to fill out the FAFSA is from January, and February, it could be that in February or in January you don't have your tax information available to complete the FAFSA. So what I recommend in that particular instance is to do an estimation, because in most cases you would have had your last paycheck stub and know how much money you made. So you can do an estimation, but as soon as you get the taxes done, and that's one of the cool reasons why it's recommended you do the electronic FAFSA, is once you get your taxes done, then you can always go back and update the tax information. But don't make not doing your taxes on time or early enough a reason why you don't complete the FAFSA. You can always do an estimation and then go back again and update the tax information. If you will do it electronically, another thing that's going to be required is that you apply for a PIN. What is a PIN? It's a number that will identify you as yourself in the eyes of the federal government, that will allow you to say, this is me, and with that number I am signing my application and it's a valid signature, you can accept it. If you are a student that needs to have their parents' information on the FAFSA when they fill it out, both the student and one of the parents also need to have a PIN. So you will have your personal PIN and the parent will have their personal PIN, and you both can sign the FAFSA electronically. And to apply for a PIN, it takes no more than about 5 minutes. They'll ask you some personal information, and the PIN that you have is the same one that you're going to use year 1, year 2, and all the way up until you don't need to apply or fill out any federal financial aid forms. And again, also, the PIN that your parent will be applying for, will be receiving, is the same PIN that he or she will use for themselves whenever they need to sign a form or a document related to the financial aid application. If you have siblings, the same PIN that they use to sign for your FAFSA is the same PIN that they're going to use to sign for your siblings' FAFSAs as well. And what are some of the eligibility criteria? What are some of the things that the feds will look at to determine if you're going to be eligible or not? You must be enrolled or accepted into an eligible program of study, meaning you cannot be attending school just to attend. You have to have a purpose. You have to be looking for something that will lead to a degree. You must be a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen that we talked about before. If you are a male between the ages of 18 and 26, you need to register with the Selective Service. Now, what is the Selective Service? It's not that you are joining the military. It's just making yourself available to the government to let them know if the need. And then, by the way, there has not been a draft since I've been born, so it's not likely that there's going to be any draft. But not registering with the Selective Service can potentially keep you from, well, definitely will keep you from getting financial aid, and it can potentially keep you from getting certain jobs as well. So it's really an important thing. If you are a male between the ages of 18 and 26, you have to register. You cannot be in default on a federal student loan, meaning you took out a student loan, the time came for you to start paying it back, and you decide you are not going to pay it back. So eventually what the feds will do is they'll put you in default, which means that they'll ruin your credit and will also prevent you from receiving any additional financial aid until you clear your status with them. You may not owe on an overpayment of federal grant or loan funds. And very important, and I will stress on this part here, is that it says you must be making satisfactory academic progress. Each institution administering federal financial aid has to have what's called the Standards of Academic Progress Policy, which is really a measuring tool that says you are worthy of receiving and maintaining financial aid or you are not. Every year the school has to evaluate your academic performance to see again if you are worthy of maintaining eligibility or if you lose eligibility. And most they have to have at least 3 components where they measure your GPA. You need to be at least an average student. They also measure your completion rate. Your completion rate needs to be at least at 67%. I know for here at Miami-Dade College, if it's below 67%, then that means you would lose eligibility. And also, you are limited in the time frame given to complete the degree you are pursuing. And that limit is what we call the 150% rule, which is again a cap on how many credits you can attempt to earn the degree you are pursuing. In other words, it looks at, let's say you are pursuing an associate in arts degree, and the associate in arts degree requires 60 credits to complete it. You would be limited at 150% of 60 attempted credits, and 150% of 60 would be the 60 required plus an additional 50% of 60, an additional 30 in case you had to drop a class year or you didn't do well. So at 90 attempted credits, you would be at a point where you have to have a degree. If you don't, then you would lose eligibility. And again, the 3 components are the grade point average, which needs to be at least C average, the completion rate, which is 2/3 of the classes you attend, and again, the cap would be 150% of what's required for the degree you are pursuing. You may not be eligible if you are convicted of possessing or selling drugs. It's one thing I really, but anyways, that does not mean categorically you will never receive it. Depending on what happens or what you've done, what types of programs you've participated in, you can have your eligibility restored. And if anyone is taking prep courses, financial aid does not cover more than 30 prep credits. Not classes, but credits. Okay. At the very beginning, we talked about completing the FAFSA as a multi-process, or applying for financial aid as a multi-process process. The first level of processing takes place at the federal government. Now, when you submit your information to the feds, they have no idea who you are or if the information you're reporting to them is accurate or not. So what they do is they randomly select a few folks for the process we call verification. The verification process basically, what it is it will ask the institution that will be processing your financial aid to collect documents from you, the student, to make sure that your eligibility is calculated on true and accurate information. So some of the documents we usually ask are the tax return transcripts, at least the tax return transcripts and the verification worksheet. And remember when we talked about doing the FAFSA electronically, one of the cool features is that you can load your information directly from the IRS to the FAFSA. If you were to use that feature, then that means even if you were selected for the process we call verification, then we're not going to be bothering with asking you for the IRS tax transcript, because your information would have come directly from the IRS to your FAFSA. But again, if you are selected for verification, your school will follow up with you and let you know, we know you are interested in attending our institution, but you've been selected for this process, and in order for us to continue processing your financial aid, we need X, Y, and Z documents. So as soon as your school communicates with you of what they need, you need to make sure you get back with them and provide them with the documents that are being requested of you. Because until that's done, your eligibility cannot be confirmed, and an award cannot be processed for you. We talked about all of those. Now, once all of you fill out the FAFSA, the school gets in contact with you, you submit the required documentation. What happens? What happens is that the school awards you, different whatever you are getting in financial aid, and they send an award notice to you to let you know that we received your information, you met the eligibility requirements, and these are the things that you are eligible for. Okay. Now, it's very important after you receive that notification, because most institutions will have how could I say that, um, information that corresponds to your award, that will, I would say to a certain extent, break down the terms and the conditions of the award to you. It is very important. I know at least for Miami-Dade College, we do have on the attachment, on the award notice, at the bottom of the link, that takes you directly to the terms and the conditions of the award. The terms and the conditions of the award basically tell you how to manage the award. If you were to take X amount of credits, how that will impact how much money you get, and things like that. And if you were to do certain things, and how your actions could potentially affect the award that you are getting. And that's why it's really important, even after you get the award notice, to not be content, but to go ahead and read the terms and the conditions, so you know exactly what the conditions to you maintaining your award are. Now, this is a good question. It says here, does financial aid pay for summer? Remember at the beginning we talked about we have just a few minutes, and that's very important, so I'll go over it very quickly. There are 3 semesters in the academic year, but financial aid is usually awarded to you based on the 2 major semesters, which we call the fall and the spring, and certain institutions call it winter. If you are attending, the amount of financial aid you get is based on the amount of credits you are taking. There are 4 different levels at which you can receive financial aid. You have full-time. A full-time student is a person or a student that's enrolled in 12 credits or more. Not classes, but credits. Then you have the next level is 3/4 time. 3/4 time is someone taking between 9 and 11 credits. Then you have half-time, which is 6 to 8 credits, and you have less than half-time, which is 1 to 5. The amount of financial aid you get, and we'll go back to, this is very important, to this slide, and it gives you a breakdown of how your financial aid will be given to you based on the amount of credits you are taking. At each of those levels, the amount of funding you get is different. If you're a full-time student, the amount you see on the award is what you get to keep. But if you take less than full-time, then that amount reduces as well. Okay? And in the case of where that question is really important about whether you get financial aid for the summer, it's if you attend as a full-time student for the fall and the spring, that means you would have used the full amount that's allocated to you by the federal government for the academic year. And for the summer, what we do recommend, since you would have used the full amount that's allocated to you, is to the refunds you are going to get, if you do get any refunds, to save that funding to be able to apply that towards the summer. The Miami-Dade, for instance, has funding that we sometimes make available to assist students who are in this particular category, but it's not guaranteed money. Okay, so again, my strongest recommendation is when you do get those refunds, to please save them if you plan to attend the summer, because if you attend as a full-time student during the fall and the spring, the probability of you using the full amount that's available to you is great, and you may not have funding available in the summer. So the refunds you are going to get, again, is what you need to make sure you keep and save. Now, we'll do a quick recap. We didn't really have too many questions, but 2 things that I hope you really get and take advantage of is complete the FAFSA, complete it early, and make sure you are not afraid to ask questions. Thank you.